We are live. And I misspelled functional training. It's functional training. I'll adjust that afterwards. I'm not planning on keeping this one up, so it'll essentially be a Q&A on functional training. I will be fielding questions about functional training. You know what's interesting about functional training? Is that as a concept, people think that functionality starts in the weight room and it ends in the weight room. And they don't ever even begin to ask themselves. You know, there's oftentimes people say even like, this girl, she's real dramatic, she's high maintenance. And, you know, she seemed to really have come from a dysfunctional household. What does that mean? What does that mean? Usually that, you know, she probably argued a lot. Parents probably fought a lot, all that stuff. And I don't think oftentimes people really think about the fact that functionality as a general concept is really important for their life. If they want to attain health, tranquility, even if they want to have fun, like efficiency is a huge part of that. And functionality is like really the core component of high quality living. It's kind of mind blowing. What's your guys' take on functionality? Before FP, what was your guys' take on functionality? Because I'm sure everybody that's here kind of probably sees things in the same regard that I do. But when people thought about functional training, were they thinking about generally making the body and making the human organism more efficient? Did anybody here, what were people's perceptions on functionality when they first heard about it? As you guys know, I like to ask a lot of questions. So, and a lot of times I'll just do it through polls because it's really easy to get quick answers that way, just to kind of gauge to see how crazy people are, or how how far off they are from reality. It usually takes you guys about 3-4 minutes before you warm up your brains to start commenting. So I'll hang out for a little bit. Or not, I guess you guys aren't going to talk. So, I'll give it about another 30 seconds. Then I'll close it out. Before FP, I thought sports/Olympics, I'm assuming Olympic lifting was functional, so I was trying to get better at all the sports. I know I was wrong. I'm assuming Olympic lifting, I guess what you were getting at. That's crazy. So Delangers, I had no clue what functional training was before FP. I was an idiot. Well, Delangers, if you didn't have a clue, what was your supposition about functional training? What did you think about? What did you conclude in your head at the time that constituted functionality in training? Before FP, I did CrossFit and had back pain. Damn, that's crazy. I called that one. I viewed functionality as what CrossFit did in terms of not using isolated machines and using more free weights. Man, that's crazy, bro. I guess not everybody had the same background, so I guess why it's probably hard to come to a more complete and definitive conclusion about what it was. Delangers responded, probably Olympic, responding to his question about that he thought he was an idiot. Probably Olympic lifting, CrossFit, and yoga. Damn. I thought more muscles with good form lifting equals more functional health. I didn't think about Patricia writes, I didn't think about functional training until FP. I was just looking for something to stop hurting my boxers during strength and conditioning. Anything unconventional, bands, kettlebells, etc. Also isolated rehab muscle exercises, but still isolated movements. Interesting, man. It's crazy, man. Where people came from to finally come down. I believe it's a more functional path. You know what's crazy is that very few came to the perspective of like, okay, functional training is supposed to make bodies more symmetrical and balanced. Like, you know what I mean? Like that's kind of a crazy thing, right? That you never heard that. I guess that's kind of where I came from. That, you know, if you have an asymmetry, that functional training is supposed to correct that. Before FP, functional was stuff on balance board, Swiss ball, etc. Crazy, yeah, that's a common one. I thought functional training was a combination of weightlifting, yoga, PT, rehab exercises, and sports. Crazy, man. Holy shit. Yeah, I thought quite a few things like that too. I thought like gymnastics. I mean, don't get me wrong. I knew that there was functional sports that were out there, like some sports that were more functional. But I thought that the way that people went about things, I was just like, okay, you guys are just grinding your gears more than anything. So yeah, I think this is fascinating. This is actually a really good talk, guys. I also thought functional was basically doing stuff that related to everyday life in terms of sitting all day, but no one ever really talked about our biological characteristics. Crazy, man. That's crazy. Yeah, because oftentimes people just figured like, you know what, I need to learn, I need to learn how to deadlift because, I need to deadlift really heavy weight so I can know how to pick up a box. I remember that was like a real common one back in the day. And we'd be like, well, you're not going to deadlift, and how are you going to learn how to lift? I'd be like, you could just grab something and then just learn how to do it with good form or technique. What people don't realize is that if you actually just correct your gait cycle to the degree that you're supposed to, actually, let me rephrase that. Until you correct your gait cycle the way that you're supposed to, anytime you lift something, you're going to be asymmetrically shifted in the pattern that you're already shifted in. So it's kind of like you're going to get caught up in a trap. And the trap is going to be that, like, at some point, something's going to herniate laterally, or something is going to go wrong because your body is spiraled in one direction when you're going to lift it. So essentially, you can't really learn how to lift something until you've actually learned how to, like, unspiral your body, right? Like, the more that you lift, and the more you lift with having your body on one spiral, the more damage you're going to do to yourself over time. So yeah, that's an interesting thing, because a lot of times people would be like, if I just do a deadlift, it's going to help me learn how to lift weights. And I'm like, yeah, but what about all the imbalances and the dysfunctions that are in your body prior to lifting? Is a deadlift going to account for that? And obviously it can't, because it's not a spiral dominant exercise. It's a longitudinally dominant exercise, meaning that the up and down pressure that's involved in a deadlift overrides the horizontal components of it. Of running, because it's movement is partially vertical and it's partially horizontal as well. There's an interplay between both of them, and they're both important. But the deadlift only trains the vertical aspects of it, and it involves very little spiraling in the body. So yeah, it was a fascinating thing that people used to talk about back in the day. Glenda C. Bradshaw writes, before FP, functionality was getting out of pain after trying many methods. FP has been an amazing game changer in how I live and my thought process, progressively learning and moving forward. That's awesome, Glenda. Keep it up. I thought functional training was anything geared towards a specific task. Stu Line writes, yeah, that's the thing. People say, yeah, to improve a specific function or task. That was the common definition of it. And I was like, yeah, so if I wanted to, I always thought, what's the consequence of doing that? If I want to make my bench press, improve it, let's say I did improve it, what would that mean for everything else that I did with my body if that's the only thing that I wanted to do? If I only wanted to improve my bench press, back squat, and deadlift, let's say, and my power clean, then if I focus on improving all those things, what's the consequence of all the other things that I'm going to do? Those are the things that I was thinking about a long time ago. And I think everybody's kind of keeping up with it. Now there's new people on the horizon that are controversial. I'm not the controversial guy anymore. I guess at this point, yeah, there's other people that are just a bit batshit crazy, stirring up the controversy. It's fascinating stuff. But yeah, it's funny. There's a history that people just don't know about. I guess I'll have to maybe make a documentary on it in the future. It'd be interesting. Before doing FP, I was doing Michael Boyle strength and conditioning. Yeah, he seems like a pretty knowledgeable guy, but again, just old school, not really gear oriented around correcting dysfunctions, slinging, pumping. He's not big into those things. I thought functional training. Jamie Fisher official writes, I thought functional training was to have better, longer conditioning for athletes. Yeah, that's crazy. It's funny, how many variants we get on functional training, right? If I say functional training is essentially to condition people to be less wasteful with their body. That's a pretty unifying imperative on the term functional training, right? When you train functionally, you aim to eliminate waste. That's what functional training is supposed to do. Fascinating, right? Union, yeah. I thought functional training is focused on enhanced movements with certain functions in life. Yeah, exactly. That's a common one. It's whatever the functions are, then you improve that, right? I want to get better at whatever. The sitting or squatting was always the typical one. The funny thing is that I want to enhance movements with certain functions in life. And I'm like, well, if you guys are focused on that, why wouldn't you guys want to focus on correcting walking mechanics? And do that in walking and running. This is something that I talked about way back in 2012, maybe even 2011. And I talked about that publicly. I mean, I knew about this stuff 2008, I think, 2009. At that time, I was already working on trying to orient most of the things that I did around gait. But I just think it's funny. Nowadays, you have people that are literally talking about gait. It's cool to see people catching on. I think back then nobody knew, Abby writes, I think back then nobody knew what functionality really meant. They just based it on their bias and perceptions. Yeah, I think oftentimes people just don't even take into consideration what words even mean. They're not concerned with the meanings of words. They use words, they listen to words, and they're just well, what does that mean? What are they getting at with that word or that phrase? And they don't look up what the words actually mean. They're not concerned with the meanings of words. And I get a sense that people are slowly evolving to that path, fortunately. But for the longest time, people just were oh, yeah, okay, whatever. You tell me that functional training is you enhancing a specific task or function. Okay, I'll just accept it because that's what everybody just talked about. So, okay, here, this is awesome. It's functional training. Functional training is total body exercises. That's what people are okay, I guess I'll just say that. And it's but people wouldn't really be able to extract meaning of saying, well, what's the point? Why am I doing this? Why do I want to engage in that specific task? What if I use my upper body? Is there a better way to use my upper or my total body? Are there better ways of doing it? These are questions that people didn't ask, and these are questions that I asked a long time ago. And I'm well, what am I doing with this? So it's kind of what got me ahead of the curve in terms of where the industry's at, and I've been working on it obviously substantially. But yeah, it's. I don't think it's necessarily just based upon biases. I think a lot of times it is because. Let's face it. When people come into the fitness industry, you'll be like, "Hey, look, I'm a real estate agent, and I'm a personal trainer on the side. Hey, look at me, I'm a chef, and I'm a personal trainer on the side. Hey, look at me, I do. Let me think of. Hey, look, I do tile work or whatever, or I do. No, that would be. I'm trying to think of it like what. Oh, look, I trade crypto, and then I do personal training on the side. Hey, look, I'm an investor. And look, here's my fitness tips. It's everybody and their mom has fitness advice that they could present, and virtually none of it works. And it's our industry has become so saturated with people who literally don't know anything of what they're talking about. And they just become, influencers on the gram. Hey, look at me, I got a big butt. Let me show everybody how much of a specialist I am with this big butt of mine. Or look at my abs. And, I have abs myself, but I can't get abs on anybody else. And I can't, I have decent movement, but I can't get other people. But look at me, I'm like a clown just doing a bunch of exercises on my Instagram page. Follow me. Look, I'm a fitness person. Yeah, it's pretty astounding, man. When you see, when you see how diluted our industry has become. Delanger writes, my last physio before FP told me to heavy deadlift in order to fix my bulging discs. That deserves a face palm. That's a physio, guys. Physios go through at least, I guess, unless you're in some areas in Germany, they go through at least like 6 years of school. And that's the recommendation. Mind-blowing stuff. That's mind-blowing. You should not deadlift if you want to, fix a bulging disc. You should not be focusing on loading yourself in the longitudinal axis that much. You should figure out the horizontal axis of motion, right? You should figure out how to rotate your body correctly, how to shift things into the right place before you begin to try shifting before you really try moving your spine. Mind-blowing stuff, man. That's crazy. What did you think of the new 100-meter gold medalist gait? It's good, bro. If he's there, obviously his gait cycle's got to be pretty damn good. I will say he's definitely spiraled hard. I think it was to his left. He was spiraled to his left, and he's highly asymmetrical. But if he's there, bro, it's like he's obviously a fast runner. He's doing something right. FP creates the standard for what functional training is. Yeah, I believe so. I think we're definitely setting the standard, and nobody's really arguing with us on it anymore. And if they do, they won't harp on it too much. They won't get into the details of it, because if they get into the details of it, they're going to be like, oh man, we got to start talking about things like biology, priority in movement, like what's the priority that a human has as it relates to function. Like if we're going to improve a function on a human being, because that's what functional training is, which function is the one more relatable to humans? Well, the one that they did the most in nature, which was walking, running, throwing. These are the ones that we really relied upon greatly for survival in nature. Standing, the big four, right? Standing, walking, running, throwing, right? Those are priority. Then at that point, you could talk about squats or whatever, but you got to talk about the ones that matter the most. Standing, because we had to get upright in order to be humans, and then walking, because, we learned how to walk on the ground so we could, start freeing up our hands to do more things. Running so we could either run from something or run towards it if we wanted to hunt it. And then throwing, spear chucking, all that. It's clear that we're throwers. Obviously it's a learned behavior because not everybody's great at throwing. You have to learn how to throw. But nonetheless, it's pretty indicative that our muscular anatomy is oriented around those things. But then the funny thing is, anytime I've talked about that, people just assume, well, Naudi only does that. That's all he does with movement. But yet again, I'm studying wrestling, MMA, high-level athletics. I study literally everything. All the martial arts, jiu-jitsu, everything. I study literally everything. I'm as diversified in my portfolio for movement as anybody you'd ever see. I look at gymnastics. I look at all that stuff. I study everything. But the derivative to most motions for human beings go back to standing, walking, running, and throwing. This is where it all starts. And I just think it's, don't get me wrong, squatting matters. Those things matter, but they pale in comparison to walking. So yeah, it was always like a very uncomfortable thing. It's still an uncomfortable thing for people in my field to talk about, to say we should orient ourselves around gait. And never mind that there's some people that are doing it now. Are they actually correcting it, or are they just saying, hey, look, let's go ahead and just flacidize your LCLs or MCLs. Let's go ahead and just flacidize our hip labrums. Let's get quote unquote better gait and then just make our ankles more hypermobile. Yeah, let's make our hips more hypermobile. Let's get those acetabulums. Let's make sure that we need a hip replacement in 10 years. That's kind of what I end up seeing, unfortunately. How does functional training help someone alleviate clicks and cracks in their joints when moving? The way that it helps is if you learn how to sequence the body correctly, then ultimately your joints glide, tissues glide. It's like they need to be placed in the right position for them to create a contractile force in an integrated fashion. So if you want muscles to all work together, they need to be positioned to work with one another. And when the positioning's off is when you end up getting those clicks and cracks. That's disastrous when that happens. If I have anybody who has that as a client, Like if it's like if it's a continual like subluxation of a joint or one where it's always grinding, that's a problem. One thing is if it's a cavitation, which is a different thing, which is things that I look for, and they always mean something good. Pretty much every time they mean something good. But if I get something where it's like a consistent, then that's going to be a problem. Athletic functional training included doing any proprioceptive exercise that focused on controlling your own body weight. Boy, was I wrong. Yeah, man, there's a lot of suppositions about that. But, bro, it's a part of it. I mean, easy prove 999. It's like that's not a bad assertion. It's just it's incomplete. The thing is, all these things that people say are incomplete. They take a stab at it. What I went about it with is I'm like, okay, what are the core fundamentals? What's the common denominator of all humans? What are the movements that they need to do? If there's any motions that a human really needs to do, which one's it going to be? Well, if it's a non-motion, I guess standing is kind of a motion. You're never perfectly still, but standing is one of those things you need to have dialed in. Like you need to be able to stand upright, and you need to have good alignment in your spine, your hips, your femurs, your tibias, all that. What is great alignment? That's being determined. But gait dynamics are going to matter greatly. Those things are going to matter a great deal as it relates to what fundamentals are for human beings. Like I said, people are starting to get it, fortunately. And like I said, I'm gonna take credit for that because I got a shellacking for it back in 2015. I got reamed, not 2015. I got reamed for this back in 2011, really. When I started doing the sling-based training and whatnot, guys, I got reamed really, really hard. People laid into me. So I guess I kind of have to take credit for what's been done. If it doesn't respect natural law, easy proof, if it doesn't respect natural law or human evolution, it's not functional. You were right all along. It's true, man. It's true. And the results are showing it, which is what's cool. It's awesome when you put forth the hypothesis, you end up coding the body. You end up you end up reverse engineering the dysfunctions correctly. And then the results end up showing. You see muscle fibers reorient in different directions. They volumize, and then you see them in motion. And then you get this plumpness, this animal-like consistency. Like if you look at a real athletic dog, like a greyhound or something like that, run, you'll see that same like mechanical drive on a body when you put it in the right places. So yeah, it's awesome to see the hypothesis flourish into something that actually works. And man, that hypothesis is just being proven more and more every day to me as I see it. I do FP, Jay Delaney, 35. I do FP. In order to unspiral my body, do I need to do more reps in spiraling in one direction or do equal reps on both sides? The question is, are you even spiraling correctly in either direction, Jay? That's the question. For me, that's what I try and help people do, is actually get to a spiral better. How do you spiral everything? And so if you're stuck in one facet, how do you get to the other side? What are all the pieces of the puzzle that you need to do? What is a spiral itself? What are the dimensional constructs of it? What are the dimensional aspects of it? Right? You get some people that talk about spiraling, be like, oh, spiral, spiral, spiral. But you look at the founders of all these methods and they all have a beer gut. They all got a friggin' beer belly. They're bloated as hell. It's like, there's no way those people could spiral properly anywhere. Not really anywhere, but the spine is definitely not going to spiral where it needs to. Yeah, so, just keep that in mind that if you're going to, the complexity is even being able to spiral, to actually have the spinal decompression there to facilitate the spiral. Because if you don't have the spinal decompression, if you don't have the pressurization components set up in your core, your thoracic, your cranium, all these places, even in your arms, if you have no capacity to actually fulfill decompression in your body, good luck trying to create a spiral. It's just not going to happen. Before you can move anything on your body, like imagine that somebody put like 5 heavy wet blankets on you and like you tried moving around, you wouldn't be able to move because there's no space for you to move, right? It's when you get space you can move, and it's not until you can create space in your body to move joints that you will be able to move the joints. So when I talk about things like spiraling, you have to think about it under the perspective that the spiral is only going to happen in relation to all the things that you can move. And what most people don't recognize is that the things that they are moving on the body are not the things that actually need the movement. They typically move the things that don't need the movement and not the things that do need the movement. And that's why they don't get results. So It's the problem is actually understanding what a correct spiral is. I'm still figuring that out, bro. Like I'm a scientist. I don't act like I know it, because dude, it is complicated. It's extremely complicated. It's very confusing. Even the people that I respect in this industry, it's a short list of maybe 2 people, if that, they will tell you that they get confused all the time about the body. It's confusing, bro. It's confusing. You just look at it, you're like, wow. Like, okay, when is this supposed to work? When's it supposed to rotate? When is the shift supposed to happen? Oh God. And then you have to account for like 10 other spots on the body at the same time. And even then there's still like 40 other things, 50 other things that you haven't accounted for. It's like, there's so many things to account for. Like how do you just rotate, let's say, for example, thoracic 10 and thoracic 11 without rotating the rest of the spine? Like, think about that. Think about that. And what happens if you have one thoracic vertebra that's completely compressed, and then you're like, hey, bow your knees out or spiral your legs? What if you have one vertebra popping out, or like it's herniated, and then you're like, you need to move that hernia. You know you need that herniated disc. You know you need to put that in the right position. How do you put that one hernia back in that right position? How many things do you have to move in the entire body to get that thing to shift where it needs to? That's complicated work, man. It's difficult. And this is why I get paid pretty well to do what I do, man. So yeah, this is a good conversation. I'm glad you guys are getting to hear this. Samuel Lavoie says, I think commentators at the Olympics use functional, I think you mean Olympic lifting, use functional strength stability, and the fans believe it. Or maybe the Olympics, you mean. Reading Tyranny of Words helped me out, but FP was the first step to a more functional life. Yeah. Yeah, the Tyranny of Words is a really important book. Gravity is kicking people's ass now, and they want to add weight. Yes, exactly. They can't even deal with gravity. And then they want to just skip to the front of the line and be like, hey, look, let me go do some quote-unquote functional training. Is there a next step to functional training, or do the basics fundamentals have to be understood? Yeah, of course, the basic fundamentals have to be understood. It's like if you can't do 10-week online course material, it's like there's different software upgrades, man. And what I'm trying to do is I'm putting them together. I'm really taking the next few months, potentially years, to make sure that I hone in on this craft. So when I already have 3 of the HBS courses put together really nicely. Like, they're really well structured. But then I still have like another 3 HBS courses that I want to put together. They may incorporate grappling components like wrestling technique, striking technique, but I need to scale people correctly to be able to. I need to put forth the formula, and it needs to be clear answers on how the body's supposed to move. And so essentially my job right now is to make sure that I'm doing that. I'm doing pretty well, and I'm showing this to other people too that I have near and dear to me, so they can experiment with it, because I have to experiment with these things to make sure that I close the loops. But yeah, essentially the way FP works is that there's layers to it, right? And all the layers have their relevance, but at some, like when you look at the 10-week online course, you're learning what numbers are and how they operate in order. It's just understanding a basic framework of biomechanics, of movement itself, so you can like actually fix your body. But the software gets more and more complicated as you go along. It requires you to be more aware of your body the further you go along with this stuff. So that's what my objective is, to constantly keep the body evolving to the next step. And before you can do that, you have to understand the fundamentals. Kuno Bandits, beer gut spiraling out of control. Yeah, Jesus. It can't spiral, bro. It's just stuck. It's just like a big freaking balloon. All about hydrating fascia, but I'm curious how that aligns with evolution. Where to access water probably was more limited, and humans drank water in larger amounts less frequently. Yeah, from what I understand, you have to look up Jack Kruse, but he says that mitochondria, I think I read it in books too, but mitochondria actually make water. So, yeah. I mean, think about it, bro. Your body produces, I think, anywhere between like 30 to 50 kilograms of ATP per day. And you eat maybe 1.5 pounds of food per day, maybe 2 pounds at most, if you're like not a degenerate. So think about that. You're producing literally probably 30 to 50 times more ATP than you actually consume. Like there's so much that we don't even know that's going on with physiology. So much, bro. So much. If you're going to be a competent scientist, you're not going to speak in absolute certainty with what you say because, dude, it is very uncertain. So how do these people in the Kalahari Desert or whatever, or the Sahara Desert survive such brutal conditions? Bro, biology is a marvel. It really is. It's incredible what it does. We don't fully know, man. We're still figuring it out. Thanks so much for the answer on spiraling. Thank you very much, Jay Delaney. Stulin, I appreciate you guys sticking in there with me. What would I say to somebody who is feeling discouraged? I'm not sure why you feel discouraged. I mean, I guess perhaps is it because there's complexity? I guess you'd have to elaborate more deeply as to what you're discouraged by. Maybe you're not getting results immediately, and that's the problem. I think a lot of times, man, people get discouraged because they just don't have a realistic outlook on life. They assume that to get great results, that not much effort or anguish is associated with it. Anytime you're going to do something great, it's always going to come with complications, with unknowns. Like when I worked with Kyle Dake over the last few years to help him with wrestling, all there were uncertainties. Like where I was 4 years ago when I first started working with him, it'll be formatted in a documentary here. I think by next year it should be pretty much done. But like who I was at the beginning of that process is not even close to being the same as who I am today. Not even close. And it came with loads and loads of turmoil. And I was very discouraged during certain situations because I was like, dude, I don't even know what I'm doing most of the time. Like, what am I going to do to actually get this guy to create the kind of mechanical propulsion that he needs so he doesn't hurt himself? Because he's very athletic, but I don't know what to do with his body because it's like he was a Lamborghini with a Pinto suspension on it, right? Let me put it this way. He's a Lamborghini that only steered to the left in races, only steered to the left, and it was programmed to steer to the left, and it never got in alignment. And then he needed to go into the wrestling environment where he needed to go and race the opposite direction to the right. That's essentially what his predicament was. And I'm like thinking, okay, well, it's almost like imagine that he would be like here's another example. Imagine he was a tree and the wind was blowing him this way over and over and over again, right? But that at some point he needed to start adapting. The tree needed to start adapting this way to deal with wind. Well, if a tree bends this way over and over and over again, at some point it's going to like kind of dehydrate. It's going to form its position like that. And if it's old enough and it has enough pressure that's been placed upon it, if you try bending it this way, it's going to crack and break. And that's what happens with the body. When it develops a preferential mode of operation, it calcifies. What it prefers, it sticks to. And that preference can be a problem when the body demands new types of stimuli that are regenerative. And with me dealing with his body and the other athletes, and then the general population, it's how do I get them to undo what they've already done? How do I get them to rewire that? And how do I transition them to being able to deal with that wind and get from here to here without cracking? How do I create that length, little by little, so it doesn't crack or break, so then you can eventually get to neutral or even be able to bend to the other side. And then maybe at some point, the tree will be able to bend to both sides. That's a complicated cycle. So if you feel discouraged, understand that the path of solving problems is discouraging. It's just how it is. It's why people run from it. It's why people deflect. That's why they go to escape their problems. Because when you have to confront the problems, life is way more complicated. It just is. There's loads of complexity associated with actually trying to get to the source of a problem. That is the complication of life, which is why people steer clear of me most of the time. Of course, I'm forcing them to have to acknowledge what I'm talking about. The pressure's there. The pressure is mounting. But yeah, it's been a long, discouraging road, the one that I've taken, because when you really look at the problem, it can be discouraging. But just because it's daunting doesn't mean that you just give up. It goes with the territory. If you feel discouraged because maybe you're doing FP and you're not, which you haven't elaborated in terms of what you're discouraged about, so I can't speak on it. But if at some point you feel like, my pain goes away, but then it comes back, it's like, yeah, that's part of the process. You know what's funny is people often talk about like elimination diets. Like, let me eliminate most foods from my diet. I'm going to go on a fast, and then you slowly introduce foods and see which ones serve me and which ones don't. People don't go on elimination protocols with their exercise. Like, they don't stop exercising. They just keep going and going and going. It's ridiculous. It really is ridiculous. The approach that people take in this field, it's mind-blowing. It blows my mind. So, yeah. So there will be 6 levels of HPS. That's my intent. I think it's probably going to go further than that. To in all fairness, it's going to be more than that. Like I said, I don't plateau, guys. The last 3 years have been like, it's ridiculous. It really is ridiculous, and you guys will know in time. Be patient with me. So, yeah, if you're feeling discouraged in life, just understand, nothing that's worth fighting for is ever going to be easy. That's just how life works. So get used to it. Get used to dealing with discouraging circumstances, or don't, and then just fail. But that's what people end up having. At some point, you face the problem. At some point, you're going to face the problem, and it's going to nip you in the bud eventually. So the key point is either you deal with the discouraging circumstances of getting ahead of the problem, or you deal with the discouraging circumstances of having to play catch up. And I'll tell you this much, playing catch up is way worse than trying to get ahead of a problem. I'll tell you that much right now for sure. So I'm giving you guys an opportunity to hopefully do that, and hopefully you are exercising that opportunity. So yeah, I wish you all the best. I hope this video happened to be useful for you and it was informative. I think it turned out to be really, really good. So yeah, thank you guys for hanging out. All the best.